Hello everyone and welcome to a new series of tech videos that we're going to be doing here at Kiteworld relating to some of the equipment that has been tested in the magazine. Why are we starting with this one? Well, it's something a little bit different. I think they've done a really good job with this. Each end is about 90 centimeters. You don't need to then travel with a big quiver bag. So obviously airport charges are going to be less. Probably a lot easier on a bike with a split twin tip as well. The only place that the join really suffers is on the hardest of landings. And for most people, they're the sort of landings that you're trying to avoid anyway. It's when you've made a mistake. It's when you're coming down without kite control for most people. So that's best avoided. If you're landing medium hard from a jump, there is a slight difference in the rebound, and what I mean by that is the way that the board lands and then propels forward. So there's just a fraction of a second longer on the slicer. You land, the board thinks what it's doing and then propels forward, but it never over flexes. The join is never compromised too much to the point that the tips are going to go down and underwater. The first versions of split boards that I rode a few years ago, you did feel like your foot was either side of a fence, and it was a slightly odd feeling. I mean, obviously they weren't, but it did feel like the board was just starting to give a little bit that way. The slicer's super strong. Honestly, it really does not feel like there's a join in the board for the majority of riding that you're going to do. Unfortunately for the slicer, it's been going up against the Monk for me. So this is the other board that I've had all winter that I've been riding a lot. The Monk is Shinn's flagship freeride board, has been in the range since the beginning pretty much. For freeriders, it's just like chocolate. It's absolute silk through the water, which is why it's a freeride favourite. Very, very easy on the knees, and didn't change for a lot of years. The glitch, the 2020-21 model, did change. Some people were worried, don't change the Monk, were the cries. However, what they managed to do was increase the gearing and speed. The control is still there. It's still very, very soft on the knees, but it's like a GTI now. I mean, in tough conditions, in choppy seas, which is what most of us ride in, it's very, very fluid, very quick, very easy to ride. Great carving, good release, good landings, and it's pretty light as well. It has to be a bit thicker because there's a split in the board, so that has to come from somewhere. So the mechanism for splitting is quite simple. You just lift this part up, you do it on both sides, take the W, I think it's called a W, out, and the two boards split in two. But actually, the thickness in this board is actually quite nice. It's a bit heavier, it's half a kilo heavier than the Monk. Doesn't sound like much, but it is a bit heavier at the end of the day. I think it's 2.4 kilos for the Monk and about 2.9 for the slicer. But where the slicer is better is in the light wind and at low speed pickup. The low end on this board is brilliant. So if you are traveling and you're going on holiday, the majority of times you don't go to a really high wind destination. Most places are slightly low wind, and we like to get out as soon as the wind comes in, don't we, when we're on holiday? So the slicer does that really well. Gets going quickly, has really good control underfoot. You feel very, very secure all the time. Not necessarily through the thin rails, obviously, but just what Mark always manages to do with the underside of his boards. There's always a great connection with the water. You can see some little channels here in the tips. You have really nice control over the back foot. It's not like the Monk. The torque back of the Monk in the back foot, in terms of pressing down, when you're looking for a little bit of pop to go over white water, dealing with difficult conditions, or loading up for a jump, it is quite different between these two boards, but there's nothing wrong with the slicer at all in the way that it manages conditions. You can see the tips pulled up very, very nicely, never any spray in your face whatsoever. Nicely pulled in here as well, so again makes riding in difficult conditions easy. Takes a little bit of effort to push the back foot out for a slide, to slide from heel to toe side. 53mm fins in the back and the front, obviously. Really help your grip. You go upwind really well on the slicer, I have to say. Slight difference with the Monk is at high speed it does everything better, so you're riding really fluid, really fast. It's easy to brake the rail out. It's also easy to hold your rail in. That also has 53mm fins in it, but I have to say they feel a bit smaller because the Monk does everything quicker. So just a little bit more of a push needed in your back foot to get the slicer to slide round. But in a way, that's really nice because it adds security. You never have that feeling where, whoa, this is a bit slidey, this is a bit slippy. The slicer grips, holds, goes upwind really well. And actually the other thing it does really well is it carves beautifully. Heel to toe side carves, sending the kite back across the window, dig your toe side rail in, and it's almost as if you can take a much wider arc because it floats and has quite a bit of buoyancy. Quite a lot of the time on a twin tip, when you go for that carve, you don't have very long before the board starts to bog or skips out and you start skipping around the turn. The slicer never ever does that. I had really good fun bashing wave faces on the slicer because riding at slightly slower speed, you always have good control, a lot of the board working with you. Really good fun. Pads and straps this year, excellent slight upgrades from Shinn. These are the Sneaker HMT, I think they're called. Loads of maneuverability on this side and on that side, so you can adjust the angle of your foot on each side. And then underneath, you have a 2-point Velcro system. Again, the plastic inserts to maintain shape on either side, so it comes apart and goes together really, really easily. You can position them forward or back depending on your foot size, but yeah, you can basically get a really nice fit across all of your foot, and then that nicely finishes it off like that. Primarily, obviously, it's aimed at people who are looking to save some space or have some practical advantages. I've left it in one piece for 2 months in the winter. Unlike a foil, when you then go to take it apart, there's no problem. It comes apart very, very easily. Generally, really, really comfortable. Cannot fault the slicer for what it is, as a twin tip that splits in two that anybody could ride and have a good time on.